Hello, everybody, and welcome to Proud Malcontent on the Sunday edition of Proud Malcontent. Let me just see what I've done here. I've got Stephen on screen when he's not with us yet. Stephen Duncan, of course, will be with us later on. I'm Pete Bell, and I am proud to be in Malcontent in a world where no one should be content, a world that nobody should be content with. I came to that conclusion a long time ago, but it was a conclusion which is confirmed every day when I look at the front pages of the newspapers and the online news. And I don't watch rolling news on TV anymore because that will really have you slitting your wrists and taking a rusty hacksaw blade to your throat. Very depressing. Cheerful Sunday morning to you all. Hi. I was wondering what to deal with today. I don't want to take too long with the first part of this because we're opening a can of worms today in Confute Corner because Stephen Duncan and we're going to be talking about the voting system. And this gets into the area of various proposed voting strategies and how the system works, and a lot of myths surrounding the voting system for the Scottish Parliament. So I was just looking at the national website this morning, looking for something worthy of comment. There's plenty that's worthy of comment, but oh man, it's all just so depressing. I thought, wait, let's see if we can find something different. Often the most interesting stuff in the National is in the readers' letters section, the community section. So I went in there this morning to see if there was anything, and there was a couple of things that struck me, and there were headlines. Just the headline are enough to spark a thought. And so I was looking at the headlines, and I saw this one, and there were a couple that were in the form of questions. And questions are always good. Questions are always good for provoking thought. And this one, as you can see on the screen, the question is, why won't SNP leaders explore every possible route to independence? Now, that's thought-provoking. If you're prone to thinking about things, that is thought-provoking. There are two premises in this question. The first is that there are multiple routes to independence, and the second is that the SNP leadership will only consider one. It won't consider all of them if there are many of them. So let's look at these premises first. Are the premises correct? We question the premise. Are there multiple routes, and is the SNP leadership obsessed with just the one? Is it focused, fixated on just the one? And the answer to that question is obviously yes. It goes back to 2015. In the wake of the 2014 referendum, late 2014, early 2015, when there should have been a massive rethink. There should have been a big, in-depth, independent review of the entire 2014 referendum, the campaign, the Edinburgh Agreement, the way the campaign was run, the way the voting was run, and of course the result, the way that both campaigns were run. There should have been a review of that. And then in 2015, there should have been a massive rethink and just a total reset of the whole constitutional issue. And of course, that didn't happen. There was no review, no internal review was done in the SNP, and no external, very little external review of the referendum. The 2014 referendum was done. And the SNP just went straight to this default position that the only way was Section 30. Get a Section 30 order, have a Section 30 type referendum. That was the only way, the only legal and constitutional way. And under Nicola Sturgeon's leadership, they were quite explicit about absolutely refusing to even consider any other option that wouldn't even be considered. At that time, I was still an SNP member, and it was frankly considered heresy to even mention the possibility of another way. The leadership, Nicola Sturgeon, had stated the course of action, and that was it. There was no more to be said on the matter, no discussion. And so it's true. That premise is correct. It's true, the SNP. But the question was why? Why the SNP leaders, why won't they explore these putative numerous routes to independence? And it comes back to this matter of the party line. The party line is set, and if they don't stick, if everybody doesn't stick to that party line, it sparks talk of splits, divisions within the party, disputes within the party, and that makes the party look weak. And there's this theory that the public doesn't like and won't vote for parties that are divided. I'm not sure that is true. I think a lot of the public would be quite delighted to see more open discussion within parties, more points of view considered, more discussion, more debate, and more possibility for bringing in fresh ideas and perspectives. Precisely opposite of what the SNP became in the periods after the 2014 referendum, when there was absolutely no discussion. It's the British political system, and I think it's the same all over the world now. The party line, that is it. It's fixed. It's set. And having set it, they then cannot change their minds. They cannot change their minds because that again is seen as another sign of weakness. It's seen as wobbling, and it's seen as a sign of weakness. And it gets to be really quite ridiculous. I don't know if you'll recall, but I recounted an experience that I had with Tommy Shepherd. When I approached him and attempted to speak to him about the Scottish UDI plan and manifesto for independence. And as soon as he realised what I wanted to talk about, he quite literally said, no, the fingers in the ears, no, don't want to talk about it. And the other day, I was reminded of this the other day, because when I was at the Edinburgh March and Rally, the AUOB event in Edinburgh, a friend told me that they had approached Kenny McCaskill to broach precisely the same subject with him, the Manifesto for Independence, Scottish UDI, the whole thing. And Kenny McCaskill's reaction was almost identical. The way it was described to me, it was almost identical. No, don't want to hear, don't want to hear. That literally, quite literally, closing down any possibility of even hearing a different idea. Anything that was different, it was as if there was a crime to be caught listening to anybody suggesting something which was not in keeping with the leadership's diktat on the subject. So they get fixed on this party line, and then they cannot deviate from that. And that's very unhealthy. That's very unhealthy, because the world is changing all the time. So when the situation changes, you have to adapt to it. And part of the reason, a big part of the reason that we are where we are with the whole independence campaign moribund for the last getting on 11 years, the reason is that the SNP, and I have to say this applies to the other parties. Remember, I was just talking about Kenny McCaskill there. So it applies to other parties as well. They haven't changed. They don't adapt. They're not flexible. They're not agile. They can't respond to situations. In the early days, under Alex Salmond, the early days of the SNP governments, one of the reasons they were successful, one of the reasons they were seen as good governance, was because they could respond, because of the SNP at that time was not an ideological party. It was a pro-independence party, and it had no fixed ideology. And there was an openness to new ideas. And it meant that the party in those early days, 2007, 2011, in those early days, the SNP could respond to voters, respond to how the voters reacted, and they could adapt. And that is why Alex Salmond's governments were seen as quite successful and quite popular. I called it their philosophy of government, Alex Salmond's philosophy of government, principled pragmatism. Whatever works without crossing certain red lines. And that was the way they went about it. And the public liked that. The public really liked that. They liked the pragmatism, do what worked, but they also liked the fact that there were these red lines that you did not cross, such as, for example, the nuclear red line, nuclear power, nuclear weapons, that red line never crossed. Can you say that about the SNP now? At the very least, they're wavering on that red line. So there's that inability to change, that inability to adapt, and that seems to be something that across politics we get this polarization and very fixed positions, and that's quite dangerous. It's quite dangerous. I'm not one for talking about middle ground, but there always has to be some come and go. Politics it's about managing the power relationships. That is what politics is. It's a management of power relationships, and managing something means adapting to circumstances. Managing it means making it work as well as it can in whatever circumstances prevail, and that means that you must be able to change. And that capacity for change has been lost. And we see this now with Starmer's government, where it's got on this fixed course. Of course, it was fixed by the Tories, and they're stuck with that. So SNP leaders won't explore every route, but are there multiple routes? That's another question that's worth asking. That's another premise that's worth interrogating, because are there multiple routes? I used to think so. We get people saying quite a lot, the more irons in the fire, the better. The more routes that are attempted, the better. Well, that's not necessarily true, because that's a very diffuse approach. I mean, it's a scattergun approach. So it's not necessarily a good thing. But you're up against the full might of the British state. It may be that you need more of a bullet approach rather than a scattergun approach, and you need something concentrated and focused. And the idea that there are multiple routes, I question that also, because even if there are different ways to go about the initial stages, people talk about the journey. They talk about the journey to independence. It's represented as a journey, and on any journey, you need to know your starting point, and you need to obviously know your destination. And there may be, if you think of it as a journey, there may be different ways to go. There's generally an optimum route in terms of time, fuel consumption, whatever. But there may be more than one route. But at some point, all those routes converge. Like if you're heading for a town or city, no matter which way you go, there may be only two routes into that town or city, probably more if it's a city. But you take my point, there are a limited number. Further out, there are all sorts of roads, but as you get closer, the number of routes reduces, so that all the routes converge at some point. So even if there are those multiple routes, they're coming to a point where they all converge, where there's this common point that they all must get through. So it doesn't really matter if there are multiple routes to it. You have to consider that common point, and then you have to consider whether the thing that you're representing as a route actually takes you to that point. And the situation we have at the moment is lots of people talking about lots of routes, none of which take us to that point. They don't. I'm not going to get into that just now because we don't have time, but they don't. Because that common point is legislative competence of the Scottish Parliament. That is where all these routes converge. So you talk about these different routes as much as you like. When it comes down to it, the thing that we have to focus on is that convergence point, the point of legislative competence. If your putative route to independence does not address the issue of legislative competence and does not adequately address it, then it is not a route. It gets there, it gets that close, and then it stops. Legislative competence is the issue that has to be addressed. Enough from me. You see, I've ended up, despite my determination, I've ended up talking much longer than I intended. It really is time now for me to introduce regular Sunday guest, Stephen Duncan. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, Peter.
There we go, nice and loud. That's Stephen showing off his new computer again. Welcome. Right, maybe you'd like to tell the nice people, if there are any nice people watching, maybe you'd like to tell the nice people what you're going to be talking about today. What myths are you going to be busting today?
Well, I'm going to cover a topic of this week and the next couple of weeks, which I'm sort of heading up.
Stephen, could I maybe ask you to turn your volume, turn your mic down just a little?
How's that?
That's much better, thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to be covering a subject I'm heading up as the AMS game this week and the next 2 weeks. This is the first of a three-parter, and by AMS I'm meaning the additional member system that is used for Holyrood elections in the Scottish Parliament. So if you could put the slides up, Peter, I'll go through them. So this first part, saying it's a British Unionist conspiracy, that's the sort of claim you sometimes hear about the Scottish Parliament. Its purpose is not proportional representation. It is to stop Scotland's cause, stop us returning to independent statehood. So in terms of the Holyrood elections, just a recap, people probably know this, but we'll just go through it anyway. The AMS is the additional member system that's used for voting purposes. It's a hybrid system made up of the first past the post element, which is in the constituency ballot, and a proportional representation component, which is in the regional list vote. The first past the post system is the one that's used at Westminster, and the one that's used on the regional list is really the adapted de Hont method that's used in European elections and was used here up until 2019.
Sorry, Stephen, we should say that it's the first past the post is the same as Westminster, except for the franchise. There's a much wider franchise in Scotland. Right. Is that a point worth making, I think?
I think that's correct. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to check that, but you might know more about that than me. Do you mean you're talking about people who are non-nationals?
No, I was talking about 16-year-olds.
Good point.
That I think makes a bit of a difference. It's a relevant point, and it allowed me to practice interrupting you.
No, it is relevant, and because it's particularly relevant to the cause of independence, because 16 and 17-year-olds do get a vote in that as well, and as we know, they are predominantly in favour, probably 70% of Scotland's cause, independence, that is. So back to the MS. In general, the theory is that the more seats that are won by a particular party in the constituencies, the fewer the seats will be won in the regions, and vice versa. So there's stuff like there's a sort of what you might call a constituency penalty. If you do well there, you tend to be doomed in the regional list ballot. So the overall objective is that the percentage seats in total between the regional and the constituency ballots will roughly equate to the percentage of votes that are garnered in the election. So there's sort of meant to be a sort of balancing effect. You win more seats in the constituency, you'll win less in the regional list. So what's actually happened over the course of devolution? So this table on this slide looks at election winners, the proportion of the votes and proportion of the seats that who is deemed to be the winning party has achieved in both sides of the ballot. So if we take a look at 1999, the first row, Labour were deemed to be the winner. They got 39% of the votes on the constituency side, which is 53 seats.
Sorry, Stephen, this is actually measuring the proportionality. How good is the system at creating a proportional parliament? This is what you're setting out to do here. And I believe you've done this in two different ways, or there are two different ways of doing it.
Yeah, there's maybe more than two, but there's certainly two I'm aware of. There's one, the way I've done it, which I'm just about to go through, and then there's a way the Electoral Reform Society have done it. We can sort of mention that afterwards. But they both are looking at the, as you say, the proportionality or disproportionality of the voting system. Just a couple of different ways of arriving at the same thing. On the constituency side, for Labour in 1999, they got 39% of the votes. They got 73% of the seats. Obviously, they were overly represented on the constituencies, and they were overrepresented by a factor of 87%, relatively speaking. What I mean by that is that if you take the percentage of seats that they won, 73%, divided by the percentage of votes, 39%, you get an index or disproportionality index of 1.87, which means that that's almost twice as many seats that they achieved compared to what they merited in terms of the votes that they garnered at the election.
So
moving on.
in this measurement, this metric, Stephen, is 1 is perfect proportionality.
Yes, that's right. It's
What 1 stands for perfect proportionality. I just
Yeah.
like to get these things clear in my head, Steve.
No, that's correct. Yeah, I should emphasise that on the bottom right of the slides. If you can't quite see it because of our pictures, but that it sort of shows that 1 is perfect proportionality. More than 1 is you're overrepresented, and under 1, less than 1 means that you're been underrepresented in the Parliament, given the votes that you achieved. Moving on to the next 4 columns on that table, that's the regional list. Labour got 34% of the votes, which is not that much less than what they achieved in the constituencies, so 39%. But look at the number of seats they got, 5% of the seats. So their index is 0.16, really quite low compared to, when you compare the percentage of votes to the percentage of seats. Taking the 2 together and moving to the last 4 columns, you get an average. So you'll see the overall situation is that 36% of the votes were achieved by Labour, 56 seats, which is just 43% of the seats. So that's an overall disproportionality index of 1.2. So what's happened is the regional ballot has reproportioned, has offset or corrected the imbalance that was achieved on the constituency election. You should almost think of these 2 things as 2 separate elections: the constituency election and the regional election, because the votes are independent of one another. So the index is 1.2. So that instead of being 1.87 the constituency, it's corrected back to 1.2. So it doesn't completely offset the bias of the constituency vote or the constituency seat allocation, but it certainly mitigates it. And that's the case with all the other 5 elections. If you look at the indexes, you'll see a heavy, apart from 2007, you'll see a heavy disproportionality index in the constituency where parties, the winning parties, are overrepresented on that, and then underrepresented on the regional list. So the one thing I would like to home in on is 2011, where that was the one case where famously the SNP broke the system, and they achieved a majority of seats in the Parliament. It's the only time it's happened, and that may well just be down to the vagaries of the AMS. But if you looking at just go work through these the votes that they achieved on the constituency, they got 45.4% on the constituency vote, 53 seats, 73% of all the seats. But look at the regional list; they got 44% of the vote there. I think it's a coincidence that it was close to what they achieved on the constituency in terms of votes, but it's a very high number. That's the point. It's a very high number. If you look at Labour in 1999, who also got 73% of the seats in the constituency, they only got 34% of the votes on the regional list, 10% less. And I think that's what led them to led the SNP to get so many seats on the list. They got 16 seats for that 44% of the vote. That's 29% of all seats. So points to carry on.
This seems to imply, Stephen, if I'm understanding you correctly, and I suspect the way that viewers will be understanding this seems to imply that the SNP 1 and 2, both votes SNP strategy is justified. It is perfectly valid. If getting the vote as high as possible on the list as well as on the constituency, if that actually if that's what recreates the situation of 2011, it would seem that both votes SNP is the way to go. Is that right?
Well, I think if you put up it could be interpreted that way, but if you put up the slide again, we look at 2016 and 2021 to try and answer your question. Let's walk through these 2 years. The SNP did even better on the constituency in terms of votes and seats. They got 46.5% in 2016 and even higher in 2021, 47.7. Their seats were higher again, therefore 59 and 62. Of course, on the region, the opposite happened. They only got 4 and 2 seats. They got a very high chunk of votes all the same, 42% and 40% in 2016 and 2021. A paltry amount of seats. So I've had a look at that, but you have to do a rough calculation. I'm comparing these 3 years, 2011, 2016, and 2021. Now remember that on the regional calculation, it's the number of seats you win in the constituencies are taken into account. They're taken into account in that they dilute the vote that you get in the regional. The more seats you get on the constituency vote, the more your regional list vote share is diluted. Because the calculation takes, the calculation on the regional list takes the number of seats that you've won the constituency and uses that to deflate your vote. So, for example, in 2011, the constituency seats were 53. There's 8 regions in total in Holyrood. So that means that roughly 6.6 seats were per region were achieved in 2011 by the SNP. They got 44% of the vote. If you divide 44 by 6.6, you get an effective regional starting point, regional share of the vote of 5.77%. That number is a lot lower for 2016 and 2021. It's only 5% in 2016 and 4.5% in 2021 when you work the same calculation through. So what it basically means is that the SNP list vote share, it was high in 2016 and 2021, but not great enough to compensate for the dilution effect on the regional vote in these 2 years, but it was in 2011. So I'm not sure where you could say that just having a higher vote, doing both votes SNP or both votes one particular party, is actually a correct strategy to maximize your seats. I think it's a combination of things that makes that happen.
If you were just to look at 2011, which seems to be what John Swinney is doing, he's saying that was what got us the 2011 effect, if we can call it that. If you only look at that, then he's correct. His strategy is correct, but only if you're using the 2011. If you take a broader view, it comes into question. At the very least, it becomes questionable. So
definitely,
just looking at
it's definitely questionable.
Just looking
That's
at
right. There's no context in what John Swinney says. And the other thing to bear in mind is that 2011 just happened. There was no plan to make that happen. I mean, I'm sure if you asked Alex Salmond or anybody else at the top of the SNP at the time, they'd be delighted to have heard that. That was possible. I don't remember everybody saying vote SNP in each ballot and you will get a majority. Nobody considered it. So he's saying this fluke, I'm adopting this fluke as my strategy. And I'm only going to look at 2011 and not look at the context of what's happened before or since.
Right. So, who adopts a fluke as a strategy?
Well, that's the thing.
It's less than wise. I'm making this point as strongly as possible to counter what I said earlier about it suggesting the SNP 1 and 2 was perfectly valid and the way to go. As we proceed, the things that seem obvious at first are less obvious as we take as we go wider and deeper into the information.
Correct. Okay, so I think we've covered that one. Move on to the next slide. So what this slide does, it just compares the proportionality of the Scottish Parliament, or at least the proportionality achieved by the election winners. I've not taken into account the proportionality of all the other parties, just the winners. But if in total the election, if in total we conclude that the system is proportional for the winners, then for the rest of the parties taken together, it will be proportional too, albeit it might not be for the individual parties. It's a side issue. So there's the results of the Holyrood elections for the election winners in the middle table. Overall, the index of disproportionality is 1.16 across the 6 elections. Looking at Westminster elections on the left-hand table, for the 12 elections since 1979, is a different picture. The index is 1.36, quite a bit higher. So overall, on average, you get 40% of the votes, you get 55% of the seats. And in 2024, you can see how highly disproportionate that is compared to the Scottish Parliament, but also compared to previous Westminster elections. The disproportionality index is 1.88. 34% of the seats of the votes got 63% of the seats. So Scottish Parliament is very much more proportional than the Westminster Parliament is. And this was also borne out in a couple of papers that were written by the Electoral Reform Society, one in 2019 that considered that the Holyrood Parliament was much more, concluded the Holyrood Parliament was much more proportional than Westminster.
This is a point worth emphasising, I think, Stephen, that the system works in as much as it is intended to make the Scottish Parliament proportional. The system works, and that's an important point to make, because some of the voting strategies that are being suggested, if these voting strategies were effective, they would break the system and create a disproportionality. And am I also correct in saying that even in 2011, when we got this fluke result, the proportionality was still maintained? Is that correct?
Yes, it was at one point, the index was 1.2, which was exactly the same as what Labour achieved in the first election, 1999. And I believe it was actually even less than the following election. Not much in it, but yes, it did correct the disproportionality significantly.
This is again seeming to suggest that the SNP 1 and 2 is an effective strategy, in as much as just looking at 2011, it created that fluke result, giving the SNP an overall majority, but it didn't break the system. We actually talk about the voters, not the SNP, the voters having broken the system, but they didn't break it because proportionality was maintained, and that is the purpose of the system. It's not to stop independence parties winning. It's not to stop the SNP. It was to create proportionality, which would generally prevent any party getting a majority. But the 2011 effect, if we can now call it that, the 2011 effect gave the SNP an overall majority without breaking the system. So again, if we were just looking at 2011, John Swinney is correct. And of course, he only wants us to look at 2011, and he's quite correct. If we could recreate that fluke, then it would be great. In theory, we would have a nominally pro-independence majority and still maintain proportionality. The point is, can we reproduce that fluke? And that is what comes into a serious question when you start to look wider and go deeper.
Yeah, it would be great if we were able to achieve that. It would be great for us, but I don't think it would necessarily be so great for John Swinney, because then he'd probably have to do something. But that's a different matter. Yeah, but yeah, we will touch on that probably. Third part of it. Well, we'll keep coming back to it, I'm sure. But you will see that when we start looking at the this idea of a super majority that's been touted for the last 4 years, we'll then see the system does start to get broken in terms of the disproportionality that it introduces. If we were if these strategies for getting lots of pro-independence MSPs elected on the back of the similar vote that they're achieving at the moment, then you will be breaking the system, but not necessarily breaking it in a good way.
We're preempting the future and threatening to go off at a time, but that's a nice wee taster for people of what is to come. But it was just at the point that you were making there about John Swinney would be obliged to do something. You're perfectly correct. The 2011 effect took everybody by surprise, and we should remember that Alex Salmond, not least of all, and Alex Salmond was put in the position of he was obliged to do something, as you suggest John Swinney would if he was in a similar situation. And Alex Salmond had to deliver a referendum, and people often say now, well, why did he go for a Section 30 then? If as I maintain, and many do now, the Section 30 process is so as bad as we make out, why did he go for that? Well, the simple answer is he didn't have any choice. The man who was the expert in keeping his options open was left with very few options because of this fluke victory. He had to deliver, and the only way he could deliver at that time was by Section 30. I wonder, though, if the same would apply to John Swinney now. Supposing the 2011 effect were replicated by accident, it wouldn't be on purpose. It couldn't be on purpose. If it were replicated, would he feel obliged to act? And if he felt obliged to act, would it be simply to go with another Section 30 request? The difference this time being that it's 99% certain that that request would be refused, whereas in 2011 or 2012, it was 99% certain that the request would be granted. So that there's that's big difference now. There's a lot of matters arising from this. But it doesn't really matter, because the 2011 cannot be replicated, not purposefully. There isn't a strategy for recreating. It would be replicated if the results turned out in a certain way. But there is no way to, there is no strategy for getting those results to turn out in that way, because they're two separate elections which only affect one another after the votes are counted. The elections are held separately, and it's only once the results are known. So there could only be a strategy if you knew what the results was going to be, and knew fairly accurately. If I'm not mistaken, you'd have to know fairly accurately what the outcome was going to be on both ballots, because even a little bit of drift either way can make a big difference in terms of seat allocation. Am I getting that right?
I think you're right on that one. You're definitely right to treat them as separate. The constituency vote has no bearing on the regional count. The constituency seats allocated out of that vote do, and they're taken forward into the calculation, because for every extra seat a party obtains in the constituency vote, the divisor that is, what that is used to deflate or dilute the share, their vote share in the regional list increments by 1. So that has a big impact, and I think it has a bigger impact than the percentage share of the vote on the regional list. I think that has it has more than offsets. I've not got the exact relationship, but I think that has a bigger impact than the share of than increasing your share of the vote on the regional list. It has a bigger impact on your ability to win regional list seats.
I think the simple point to keep in mind here is that it's not possible to have a strategy because it's not possible to know the outcomes in advance accurately enough for a strategy to be guaranteed to work. Even the polling doesn't give you an accurate enough account, or you can't rely on it. Safe assumptions again. You can't safely assume.
The polling's all done at national level. It's not done at local level. It would be too expensive to do at local level if you were a candidate yourself. Voters can't afford to do that. So how should I split my vote? Because if it's neck and neck on the constituency, and it would be a risk to sort of try and vote for your favourite party on the constituency and split off to your second preference on the second vote. And you might get it wrong. Your first party might lose on the constituency, and then you might end up losing on the list ballot too. So because you split your votes, you don't win either way. It's better if your candidate your favorite party loses on the constituency, and you've still voted for that same party on the list, you might get at least I've got a fallback. And if everybody did the same thing, my party preference might get compensated with the list seat. But you just don't know what's happened in the constituency, and unless you're a clairvoyant, you won't know at local level.
Yeah, and there's no such thing as magic, so we can discount that. There's some hint in there that the SNP won other indie party 2. Might be a valid strategy, but only if you're very lucky. It comes down. It strikes me that there's something of a parallel here with the fallacy of the coin toss. The coin has no memory. There's tendency of people to think when if you toss a coin 3 times and it comes down heads 3 times in a row, they seem to think that increases the chance of it coming down tails the next time, but that is not so. It's 50-50 every time. The coin has no memory, and in the same way, your constituency vote, you have no knowledge of the regional vote, and vice versa. So it's similar in that sense. Just as the coin has no memory, you have no knowledge. And in the case of the coin would have to have memory for that strategy to work. And in the case of the voting, you would have to have that knowledge in order for the strategy to work.
That's pretty accurate.
I'm explaining these things to myself here, and I'm understanding it better. Very much thanks to the way you're presenting these figures. I very much appreciate it, and I hope the viewers do too.
Okay, so just final point on this. The final comparisons with the council elections that have been I think since 2007, the single transferable vote has been used in these local authority elections. And if you look at the indices on them, they average out at 1.07. So they're very proportional. Look at the first row there. Labour got 28.1% of the votes, 28.5% of the seats, and similarly for the other 3 elections since. So it's very that's the most proportional it would appear to be is a single transferable vote. So Holyrood is almost like in between the SDV and the first past the post system in terms of its ability to create a proportional parliament. And again, this was borne out by the alternative method that the Electoral Reforms Society used to calculate the proportionality of each of these three sets of three methods for counting votes. So
I think it's possibly worth making the point that there is no, there are many different PR systems, proportional representation systems, and there is no system that is guaranteed to give a proportionality of 1 in every instance. And there's no system that is guaranteed to get even within consistently within a narrow range of 1. There's no system works perfectly, is the shorthand way of saying what I'm filling time by saying.
No,
there's no system is perfect. So the fact that the AMS, the additional member system, the system used for the Scottish Parliament, the fact that that is not perfect doesn't really count against it, because there is no such thing as a perfect system.
That's right.
Again, that's a point worth making. What really comes out of this today, Stephen, is the oversimplification of John Swinney's position on this, and I suspect we'll get to the oversimplification. We'll use Alapa as a comparator in this. We'll get to the oversimplification of their preferred strategy in the next show, or the one after. We will get to it, but we're looking at the SNP here, at John Swinney's strategy, and he can only make that strategy look valid, look credible, by asking us to focus solely on the 2011 effect, the result that it had then. That it's this issue of oversimplification that concerns me. That the politicians seem to think that we're all stupid. They seem to think that or at least we all have to be treated as if we're stupid. They seem to think that the electorate, the voters, are not capable of understanding what you have just explained and what I have sought to clarify with my interventions. Is that true? Are the voters that stupid? We know the electorate is dumb. The electorate is a dumb beast. That's when you take the voters as a mass. It is a dumb beast. It's a mob. But individual voters, the average voter, is the average voter really that stupid? You think?
Well, I doubt it. I mean, they may just. I think. Well, it's a difficult one. To be continued. I'll have to put some thought to that before I make any controversial statements on it.
Oh, I'll do controversial statements all the time, and I don't think people are stupid, but they act stupid, and I think that's largely because they're lazy, they're intellectually indolent. And I opened the programme today by looking at just the headline from the letters page of the National that posed the question, why won't SNP leaders explore every possible route to independence? And I ended up talking for nearly 20 minutes just on what was discussable about coming out of that headline, the questions that arose from it, and the debate that arose from it. And I just suspect that people are they're lazy about that. They don't ask the questions. They don't inquire. Now, whether that's an effect of politicians and the media dumbing down or whether whether it's working the other way, that it's the dumbness of voters that is causing the media and the politicians to dumb. Which way it's working, I'm not sure, but I'm absolutely certain that there is an effect there. And the effect is there's just this overall dumbing down and this overall reluctance to look deeply at things.
Well, there must be some truth in that, because the politicians wouldn't surely carry on doing it time after time, trying to treat us like fools and idiots. I mean, you mentioned, I saw your piece at the top of the program about the different, people talking about the different voting strategies. But how come after this length of time that they still haven't reached the conclusion that that there is only ultimately will only be one way to restore Scotland's independence, and there's going to be one route at the very end, and that is face London down. There isn't going to be any other way. So that's activists that are writing to the National, or people who are engaged, and they still haven't come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
And there are people who are thinking about it all the time, presumably.
Well,
but they're not thinking about it very much.
Yeah.
They're not thinking about it very much or very deeply, as you say, if that's as far as they've got after this length of time.
And we have to also take account, I'm trying to make out that voters aren't as stupid as politicians appear to think that they are, or they're not as stupid as they're treated by politicians and the media, we have to say there, because they're like the twins in this. Because there are so many voters who actually believe in these strategies. They actually believe that these strategies will have an effect. It's like people who believe that they have a system at a casino, a system to win at roulette or whatever. You and I both know that that is impossible, but people still believe in these systems. And so they believe that there is a way of gaming the voting system. But even from what we've seen today, it would seem that that's not as easy as people seem to imagine.
And I would also just finish off by saying I don't think that the system is designed to stop the independence from happening, or because we've seen 4 consecutive SNP governments and of different hues as well, minority, majority, coalition. So the nationalist fox wasn't shot. There's still about 50% of the vote, 50% of voters, according to all the opinion polls over a long period of time. It's about 50% of the people still want independence, regardless of what happened in the referendum. So this issue has not gone away. The Parliament has not been biased against the SNP or against the independence parties. And we'll see that in a couple of weeks' time when we look at the proportionality of the Parliament in terms of independence parties or pro-independence parties versus unionist parties. We'll see the Parliament is actually overrepresented time and again in terms of the seats that are allocated to those pro-independence parties. So the Parliament is not designed against independence per se. What is the problem is that those pro-independence parties, having formed the bulk of the Parliament time and again, have not had the guts or the guile to do anything with it. And that's the truth.
Right. Okay, yeah, we're actually running over time now, Stephen, but I was not going to stop you there because you were making a very important point, and that is that today's myth of the British conspiracy to prevent it is a myth, and it is well and truly busted today. So job done. Stephen, job done. Good one. And I don't know about anybody else, but I very much look forward to next Sunday's show, when we'll be looking at another aspect of this, coming at it from a different angle, and perhaps busting another myth. So once again, thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Bye now. And like I say, we're running a few minutes late today, but I think you'll agree it was worthwhile. That's it for now until Wednesday. I'm back on Wednesday afternoon, when I have not a clue what I'll be talking about, because I've not a clue what's going to happen between now and then. All I know is that I can be pretty certain that I will still be a proud malcontent come then. Thank you very much, folks. Bye.